Mist clung to the river like thin gauze as Amelia Varela pushed her canoe through the reeds. The dawn chorus of howler monkeys cracked open the sky, and the heavy scent of wet earth fed her lungs. For 5 years, the Brazilian-Peruvian border had been her living map. Every pin on that green expanse marked a species she had cataloged for the National Herbarium in Belém. She had chased lianas that secreted antiseptics, trees whose bark fluoresced under moonlight, and vines that drifted on currents of warm air like silver kites. Even so, the rumor that reached her via an anthropologist friend sounded outrageous. A tribe with a flower that sensed the union of two human spirits and responded with a bloom no botanist had ever recorded. Emilia told no one at the university about the lead. She feared not ridicule, but that the story might be wrested from the very people who guarded it. She financed the expedition herself, compressing her kit into 2 waterproof barrels, specimen jars, presses, pH strips, and a ring-bound journal that smelled of clove oil she rubbed on the spine to ward off fungus. At the last outpost, a patchwork village of corrugated tin and faded soccer jerseys, she found an uninvited addition to her voyage. Marcus Ridge lounged beside the fuel drums, camera slung across his chest, trading jokes with the ferry boys in basic Portuguese. To Amelia, he looked too clean, as if the mud refused to stick to him. "You're Dr. Amelia Varela, the plant whisperer," he greeted, flashing a grin calibrated for audiences. "Marcus Ridge. I do science documentaries for Horizon Channel. Your project sounds perfect for our Myth or Miracle series." "How did you even hear about my project?" she asked, tightening the webbing strap on her pack. "Small river, big echoes," he answered. "Look, we can pay for half your fuel. All I need is footage. If the flower is real, you'll get grant money raining from the stratosphere. If it isn't, at least the world will know. Win-win." She disliked the way he reduced everything to narrative arcs and ratings, but fuel was expensive, and her savings thin. A 2-day negotiation later, she agreed on these terms. She commanded the route and cultural protocol. He filmed, but did not interfere. He nodded eagerly, though she suspected the word interfere had elastic boundaries for him. They left the outpost just as thunderheads ballooned over the western canopy, piloting a 16-foot dugout with a small engine and 2 paddles for the shallow bits. Amelia navigated by the river's memory, turning at subtle shifts in watercolor and the sudden hush of birds above certain tributaries. Marcus captured everything, her hands tracing a map on damp bark, her gaze tucked under the brim of a sun-bleached hat. Between takes, he peppered her with questions that straddled curiosity and provocation. "Let's be honest," he said one humid afternoon, wiping sweat from his eyebrows. "You don't really believe a flower can sense aligned souls, do you?" "I believe plants read the world in languages we're deaf to," she replied. "Roots communicate through fungal networks. Acacias summon ant armies with pheromones. Compared to that, sensing emotional coherence isn't impossible, just undocumented." Marcus chuckled, unpersuaded but entertained. "And the alignment test? 2 people stand next to it, and if their hearts sync up, it bursts open like a piñata? Sounds like a rom-com gimmick." "It's folklore," Emilia conceded, "but folklore can hold empirical seeds. Besides, the tribe never speaks of romance. They talk of harmony, between hunters, between midwives, even between a mother and stillborn child. They wish to guide onward. Alignment is broader than affection." He scribbled a note, probably framing his future voiceover. "From romance to resurrection, one flower promises all." She sighed and paddled harder. On the 6th day, the river thinned to a silver ribbon stitched by fallen branches. They hauled the canoe onto spongy soil and continued on foot. Cicadas whined like electric wires above them. Spider lilies pierced the shade with white stars. Amelia collected samples, jotting taxonomic codes. Marcus filmed the ritual, occasionally asking her to repeat a gesture for coverage. She allowed it, within reason. As they trekked deeper, paths morphed into faint indentations marked by broken twigs and older footprints. Emilia sensed watchers, bright eyes behind buttress roots, the hush that descends when strangers cross invisible borders. She slowed, removed her pack, and waited. Marcus looked confused until 3 figures stepped from the shadows, boughs unstrung but present. They belonged to the Yara, a reclusive people the Brazilian government listed as voluntarily isolated. Painted heliconia red, their cheeks bore vertical lines symbolizing rivers after rainfall. They examined Amelia, noting her herbarium patch stitched onto her sleeve. One elder, hair silver as ash, recognized the emblem. He spoke a word she knew, plantas. Amelia bowed, hoping memories of her previous visits to neighboring groups would vouch for her. She offered a small packet of salt and a roll of cotton bandage, useful gifts. The elder extended his palm toward her heart, then toward Marcus's camera. She realized he asked if the machine hunted souls. She placed her hand on the lens, then on her own chest, saying, "No, no, Ruba. It does not steal." Marcus, sensing tension, lowered the camera. The elder nodded once and gestured for them to follow. Trail etiquette required silence. Amelia complied, but Marcus's mind whirred audibly. She could almost hear him editing the episode. First contact, a fragile negotiation between knowledge and myth. They reached a settlement of thatched roofs, lifted on stilts. Smoke spiraled from cooking fires, blending with the smell of cassava and roasted fish. Children paused mid-game to stare at the strangers, then scampered off giggling. The elder brought them to a communal platform where a woman painted with moon motifs ground seeds in a basalt mortar. A conversation unfolded. Amelia in hesitant Yara phrases, the woman in gentle patience. Eventually, they offered hammocks and a calabash of fermented manioc brew. Night swaddled the forest. Fireflies mocked constellations with brighter, briefer sparks. Amelia lay awake, rehearsing tomorrow's request, permission to see the orchid. The Yara protected it fiercely. Outsiders had attempted theft decades earlier, leaving scars so deep the tribe nearly vanished into permanent secrecy. Marcus snored in the next hammock, utterly surrendered to sleep. She felt both gratitude and dread for his presence. He could validate her research or doom future relations. Dawn arrived as a gray whisper. The elder summoned them to the central clearing where men and women painted with dawn colors gathered in a semicircle. At the center stood a clay bowl emitting sweet smoke, copal and crushed petals. Emilia's pulse accelerated. A young interpreter, perhaps 17, spoke Portuguese learned from river traders. "You seek Ijupa," he said, using the Yara name for the orchid. "It is not a flower for sickness of the body, but for sickness between souls. Why do you wish to see?" Emilia chose her words like stepping stones across rapids. "Because the forest carries stories in seeds. If the world hears your story, maybe they will guard the forest better." Murmurs passed through the circle, some approving, some wary. Marcus lifted his camera slightly, asking with raised eyebrows if he could film. The elder nodded, but pointed 2 fingers to his own eyes, then back to Marcus. Watchfulness. "And him?" the interpreter asked, indicating Marcus. "He records what is true," Emilia said carefully. "If the orchid does not bloom, that truth stays." The elder conversed with 3 other leaders, then faced Emilia again. Aijupa sleeps unless two hearts speak the same rhythm. That is why outsiders fail to see. You will enter with your companion. If your rhythms match, you may witness. If not, you leave and speak no more of it. Marcus laughed under his breath. So, we're the guinea pigs? All right. Doc, do we share a rhythm? Amelia felt heat rise in her cheeks. She barely knew the man. She glanced around, searching for an alternative, but the condition seemed immovable, perhaps designed to limit outsiders. Refusing might close the path for years. Accepting meant trusting, what could be humiliation or revelation. We accept, she said, before Marcus could continue joking. The elder nodded once. Preparations unfolded quickly. A pair of guides painted a thin stripe of indigo sap across Amelia's and Marcus's foreheads. They handed them each a slice of dried cacao to chew. Bitter, energizing, maybe symbolic. Marcus filmed as much as possible until a guide tapped the lens, indicating the journey ahead was sacred. No cameras. Reluctantly, he switched it off but kept it strapped to his chest, as if turning it back on might spare him from disbelief. They walked for hours beneath strangler figs and kapok giants. Eventually, the forest opened into a sinkhole, lit by a single shaft of light. At its base stood a small cluster of epiphytic orchids, clinging to a gnarled limb driven into the ground like a staff. The flowers were closed, cupped like sleeping birds. Their petals bore faint iridescence, a premonition of color. The guide stopped at the rim and motioned for the pair to descend alone. Marcus squatted, adjusting focus rings out of habit, though the lens was dormant. Any idea what we're supposed to do? Let's start by slowing down, Amelia whispered. Aligning rhythms isn't about talking. They stepped into the sinkhole, feet sinking slightly into loamy soil. The air inside felt denser, laced with resin and something floral yet subdued, as if the orchids exhaled memory, not scent. They approached the limb. A faint hum, almost ultrasonic, teased Amelia's ears. Maybe cicadas, maybe her own blood. Now what? Marcus asked, half earnest, half mocking. Amelia closed her eyes. Try breathing with me, she said. She inhaled for 4 counts, exhaled for 6. The pattern she used during field dissections to steady her hands. Marcus attempted to mimic, but stumbled on the counts. Their steps crunched out of sync. He cursed lightly. She opened her eyes, studying him. Sweat clung to his brow. But there was curiosity behind his skepticism. A flicker she had glimpsed during evenings when he described the first time he edited a film reel at age 12. How arranging moments felt like translating emotion into light. Think of something you love, she suggested. Not someone. Something you do that makes time vanish. He chuckled, embarrassed. Fine. Editing footage. Hours disappear. Good. Hold that feeling, not the thought. Let it thrum. She mirrored his stance, feet shoulder width, arms loose, eyes soft. She pictured the first herbarium sheet she ever assembled as a biology undergrad. A simple fern, but pressing it felt like archiving starlight. She inhaled the memory until borders dissolved. Around her, the sinkhole's air synced with her pulse. Marcus's breathing slowed. His shoulders unclenched, camera strap rocking with each measured tide. Minutes seemed to dilate. Amelia sensed a shift, a click inside some invisible lock. She didn't know if it was mutual rhythm or wishful projection, but the silence thickened until a soft crack interrupted it. One orchid bud flexed open, petals unfurling, like fingers stretching after sleep. Then another, and another, each bloom releasing a faint glow. Not bioluminescence, exactly, but the way dew refracts the single shaft of light above. Amelia's throat tightened. She glanced at Marcus. His jaw hung slack, eyes wet with reflection of petal shimmer. "Are you filming?" she asked softly. He shook his head, transfixed. The camera lay dormant. He had forgotten his armor. A wave of joy surged through her, bittersweet, because she wished she could record and not record, share and protect simultaneously. The flowers continued to open, forming a spiral pattern, echoing the golden ratio. At the center, a final bud hesitated, then burst into a crest of purple, edged with silver. A scent like rain on hot stone filled the sinkhole, leaving them dizzy. Marcus exhaled a single word. Impossible! Amelia lifted a hand, but stopped short of touching. Some flowers bruise at human contact. She instead memorized every curve, every pollen sac. Tears blurred her vision. She had chased miracles across continents. But this felt different, earned by surrender rather than pursuit. After several minutes, the blossoms trembled, then gradually closed until only the limb remained, bearing dormant buds as before. The spell ended, leaving the air cool. A distant bird cried, as if time had resumed. The guides reappeared at the rim, faces expressionless, yet eyes bright. Amelia and Marcus climbed out. Neither spoke on the return trek. Words would have cheapened something still echoing in their chests. Back at the village, the circle of elders awaited. The interpreter asked, "Did Ayupa wake?" Amelia considered lying, protecting the secret by denying it. But the openness of the Yara gaze deserved reciprocity. "Yes," she said. The elders exchanged knowing nods. "Then the forest judged your hearts balanced," the interpreter summarized. "You may document the story, but not the path. And never take Ayupa from her soil, or her petals will blacken like burned paper." Marcus, surprising Amelia, removed his camera, held it out with both hands. "For your archive," he said in Portuguese, and gestured to the orchid memory tucked in his mind. "I filmed nothing. The moment belongs here." The elder touched 2 fingers to Marcus's forehead stripe and smiled. A ripple of conversation, approval, perhaps relief, passed among the Yara. That evening, the tribe celebrated with cassava cakes and fish grilled in banana leaves. Drums, hollowed from cedar, pulsed into the forest. Amelia allowed herself a cup of the sweet, fermented drink. Marcus sat beside her on the platform edge, legs dangling. Firelight sketched their faces with amber strokes. "You abandoned the shot," she said. Half statement, half question. He shrugged. "Some stories work better in the telling than in the showing, and maybe I didn't want a network executive slicing ads around it. What we saw, I'm still not sure what it was, but I felt aligned, I guess." She smiled at the word's new weight. "Thank you," she said. "Are you going to publish?" he asked. "Perhaps an article on plant sentience, anonymizing location. But the core will stay oral, between people who respect it." He nodded. "If you need footage of everything else, the journey, the science context, I'll hand it over. Final cut, your call." Amelia studied him, the skeptic who had dropped his shield without noticing. Alignment wasn't romance, she reminded herself. But she also recognized that the orchid had read something genuine between them, curiosity made humble by wonder. The following week, they prepared to leave. The Yara supplied them with smoked fish, medicinal bark, and 2 carved amulets shaped like closed orchid buds. "To remind you of silence," the interpreter explained. Amelia slipped hers onto a leather cord around her neck. Marcus tied his to the camera strap. On the river, they paddled mostly in companionable quiet. When they did speak, the words felt careful, as if each syllable carried an echo from the sinkhole. Marcus recorded scenery, but kept the lens pointed away from Amelia during reflective moments, granting her privacy. One afternoon, rain hammered the canopy so hard It blurred edges into watercolor. They beached the canoe under a slanted palm, waiting for the deluge to ease. Marcus broke the hush. I used to think documentation proved something existed. Now, I'm not sure. Maybe some things can't survive proof. Amelia tilted her head, considering. Or maybe proof changes form. The Yara don't press the orchid. They press the story into people. He chuckled. And here, I thought stories were inferior to footage. Stories adapt, she replied, like seeds. They travel in bellies, in storms, and sometimes in cameras, if the carrier is gentle. He met her gaze, brow softened. A pulse passed between them. Less dramatic than the orchid's bloom, but warm, sustaining. By the time they reached the outpost, Marcus contacted his producer. He pitched a different angle, a documentary on ethnobotany and conservation without mention of supernatural orchids. The producer balked. Ratings demanded spectacle. Marcus offered to forfeit part of his fee and accept a smaller slot in the schedule. After a tense call, the producer relented. Amelia submitted a research note to a peer-reviewed journal. Observations on induced flowering in an unclassified orchid species via human biometric synchronization. She omitted coordinates and tribal names, attributing the discovery to indigenous custodians of the Western Amazon. Reviewers raised eyebrows at the methodology, but agreed the physiological data, heart rate logs, temperature shifts, merited publication under preliminary findings. Months later, the episode aired, Guardians of the Green Corridor. Viewers met medicinal vines, flood-resistant crops, and a botanist who spoke of plants as teachers. There were no enchanted orchids, only a fleeting shot of Amelia's necklace and Marcus's gentle narration. Some seeds germinate only in darkness. Some truths bloom only when hearts do. Letters poured in, schools requesting seed exchanges, donors funding canopy surveys, NGOs petitioning for protected status along Yara territories. Amelia credited the tribe. Marcus donated a percentage of his royalties to a trust managed by indigenous leaders. The forest, no less vulnerable but now more visible, gained new allies. One night, after a seminar in Belém, Amelia found Marcus waiting with 2 mugs of Guaraná tea. He handed her a small envelope. Inside lay a single photograph, not from a camera, but hand-drawn in pencil. It depicted the orchid's spiral bloom, light shimmering through graphite shading. "I've been practicing," he said shyly. "Drawing. No lens." Amelia traced the lines with her eyes, memory rushing back like cool sinkhole air. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He cleared his throat. "I was thinking, alignment isn't a one-time event. Maybe it's a practice. Coffee next week?" She laughed, a sound like petals snapping open. "Coffee? Yes, but no filming." He raised 2 fingers in mock solemnity. "I promise, not even a selfie." They walked into the sodium glow of street lamps, their steps unconsciously synced, somewhere in the heart of a protected patch of Amazon. A cluster of orchid buds waited for the next pair of harmonized rhythms, patient as stone, delicate as dawn.